All right then. Right. So I want to start by welcoming everybody to the Business and Science Professionals panel. And I want to also thank the students as well as the panelists for coming out here today um, and taking the time out of their schedules to be here to offer advice and insight to our students. The goal of this panel is for the students to get advice from professionals in the field. And you should also have some questions ready for the Q&A portion of the panel. So to start off, I wanted to ask the panelists to introduce themselves with their name, job, educational background, and anything else they'd like to say about themselves.
Sure. Would you like me to kick it off,
Yes.
Carla? So John Leyerle, in the top left-hand corner of my screen. I'm not sure where I appear on your screen. UCI has been a part of my life for a long time. I graduated with a bachelor's in physics in 1972, which means I started in 68. I think I was the first class to go through the university in 4 years. I think there were classes that started in 1966, but they were advanced standing, not freshmen. I've been blessed to live 3 lives professionally, and I'm in my 4th life at this point. So for the first 2 decades of my career, I worked in land development on large master plan communities and applied my physics degree in the area of acoustics, community noise measurement and noise control principally, measuring transportation sources of noise like jets flying into El Toro Marine Corps Air Station once upon a time. The next 2 decades of my career, I was blessed to work for John Wayne Airport and spent about half that time leading their access and noise office with a staff of folks who were very, very capable. You might imagine that the folks that live in the flight path at John Wayne Airport notice airplanes flying overhead, and many of them care about that. And so the airport spends a lot of time responding to that care. The other half of my 2 decades at John Wayne Airport, I was number 2 in facilities, the assistant deputy airport director of facilities, and my boss and our team built the 3rd terminal at John Wayne Airport. If you've been there, it's a terminal that I think Southwest Airlines is still operating out of. It was an extraordinary, optimal thing for a career. So those were, and during all of that time, blessed to be a reserve officer in the United States Coast Guard, retiring after 38 years of service. So my 3 sectors, private sector, public sector, and military sector, now complement my 4th career, which is volunteering for nonprofits. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that work and have every intention to continue doing it indefinitely. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Tiffany, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. My name is Tiffany Awischus. I got my degree from in chemistry in 2010. I actually followed a very nonlinear path out of college. I have been made fun of by Professor Van Rankin multiple times because I say C's get degrees. I mean, I was a good chemist, but I wasn't the best chemist. I knew I was good with people. I loved interacting and learning new things. So really my career started in the construction business right out of college, one day after graduation to be exact. I got a job as a material scientist in the construction business. So I really started my career in the lab, working with chemical engineers, doing a lot of testing that I really did not learn as an undergrad, but figured out and did well in the lab space. I did that for about 3 years out of college, and then my competitor hired me as an R&D manager in Riverside, where I, formulated products in the floor setting world. So tile adhesives, grouts, mortars, underlayments, waterproofing, and I ran that team for about 2 years. And then internally got promoted into my marketing role, where I was a product manager for about 3 years, ranging from flooring to our facade division, and again all internally, all internal growth. So every time I took a step in my career, it wasn't anything specifically from my background, but I figured it out and learned it. And then from marketing, I actually went into a sales role about let's see, it's been 5 years now. I stepped into sales as an architectural sales, working for Terrazzo and Marble Supply. So John Wayne, every airport you could think of, I designed products with architects and interior designers driving those specifications. So I did that with them for a few years. And then just recently, I made a move to Armstrong Flooring. So I work for them as their sales market manager, where I can kind of take my marketing and my sales experience to grow sales in the territory. And really the reason why I made that move is because I have a 22-month-old daughter. So it allows me to be more local because I was doing quite a lot of traveling prior. So that's me.
Thank
Neil?
you, Neil.
I'll start backwards. So I wear a few different hats. I serve as the United Nations AI advisor, and I help co-found the UN AI for Good initiative. I'm very active in the venture capital space, and so I'm actually part of 5 different funds. IBM Master Inventor and was part of the original IBM Watson team. So I've helped pioneer the current AI wave that we're in. My formative career, though, as a management consultant working with global Fortune 500 companies. So I was the guy that actually took Starbucks back to the China market, except successfully this time. I identified the Marvel acquisition for Disney and helped them actually engineer the deal. So I've had quite the eclectic career working in a lot of different industries with lots of big names and big name companies. And it's given me the opportunity to work with a lot of different types of people around the world. So I'm actually been very grateful for that. Also a part-time professor at UCI. So I teach a couple of classes during the year. And I'm a very proud anteater. Zot, zot, zot. I did my undergrad and my MBA here at UCI. So always glad to give back because the school has been so good to me.
Thank you all very much. Okay, so now we're going to get started with the actual Q&A panel portion. So for the students watching, you can go ahead and leave any questions that you want in the chat and I'll read them to the panelists. First, I'll start by reading the questions that were left when the students RSVP'd first. So the first question to our panelists is, what experiences do we need to apply for a job?
Well, I'll take a shot at it and not to overstep Tiffany or Neil for sure. So John Leyerle here. I would say that the truth of the matter is when I was first applying to a job, perhaps like most of the undergrads and even grad students who will apply for a job, I didn't have any experience. What I had was academic background and a real interest in exploring the world and coming to understand what the opportunities might be out there. I recall getting offers ultimately from a radar guided missile systems organization and an offer from an organization that tests hearing and measures noise levels in the community and in industry. Something of a diverse, I think, 2 different groups. So I would say that in addition to whatever experience you might have, having worked maybe part-time through school and elsewhere, it's some of your intrinsic qualities that I think will attract a prospective employer. Qualities like perseverance and dedication and communication skills that you can seek to demonstrate in your interviews and then really show, put on display as you find your first opportunities. So some initial thoughts.
Okay, thank you, John. Do any of the other panelists have any other comments for that question?
I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add it to John's, comments. So, I mean, when I graduated from UCI, my dream was to work for Johnson & Johnson. I wanted to be a cosmetics chemist. That's what I thought I was going to do. And really what it was because I actually was an undergrad researcher for Professor Eric Potma's lab, who was my general chemistry professor, that research experience made me stand out from maybe some other candidates. I think they liked that I had additional experience. So I think that was maybe one differentiator, is really to, I mean, school is important. I know I joked about, C's get degrees, that it really, your education is very important, but it's also important to be flexible and try different things. So, I mean, aside from me doing research as an undergrad, I was a private tutor that I kind of ran my own side business for 3 years. And people laugh, I was the founder and president of Go and Chess Club on campus, and did chem. And so I did a lot of different things. And I think that flexibility really helped me get into where my career propelled initially.
So really great advice from both, great insight. And I think that's really the key thing there is what's the value you can bring and what separates you from everybody else, your differentiators. As a person that's actually hired college grads, I can tell you, we don't expect you to come in being able to do the job on day one and you have all this great experience. What we really want to know is what is it that we think you can do, right? How much training do you need? How much guidance you might need? But more about your aptitude and commitment. So do you have the basic knowledge? That's great, definitely need that. But why are you different from the other people? Because when you take a job, it's not just you're here to do a bunch of tasks. You're part of a team and everyone has to contribute value. And that's what they understand is how you're going to be able to do that. So are you going to be a great team player? Do you know how to collaborate with other people? So have you done projects in your classes, or have you been in clubs? Have you had leadership positions? All these things matter. And don't think of them just as resume things. If you say, well, I was a member of the Flying Samaritans, that's great, but what did you do at the Flying Samaritans? So you don't need a lot of bullet points, but you need a couple of very good stories that you can share so they understand who you are.
Thank you all for those comments. The second question is, what are some experiences that you have in the field that you're currently in?
I don't want to always be first, so I'll defer to my my fellow panelists.
I could teach a whole class on this.
I know. That's a very broad question. Experiences.
Well, one experience that comes to my mind when in the last couple of years of my career at John Wayne Airport, as we built Terminal 3, we built one of the most complex baggage handling systems that exists in the aviation industry. So whenever we go to check into a flight, we hand our bag to the flight agent and they usually turn around, there's a conveyor belt back there and they stick the bag on there and magically it ends up in the belly of the aircraft and hopefully at the airport that you want to fly to when you get there. But it turns out at John Wayne Airport and at many other airports, that bag travels through a labyrinth that is like maybe a quarter of a mile long and importantly goes into a special room, a room where TSA does a positive check, automated and then manual sometimes, on every single thing that's put on that conveyor belt. And on more than one occasion, if something kind of slips through, there's uncertainty, a plane that's fully loaded, ready with passengers and bags to take off is stopped from pushing and all the bags are taken off and all of them are rescreened. When there's that glitch. So it was fascinating as an experience in that professional walk to have a significant role for a number of months in proving the accuracy and the effectiveness of that baggage screening system. Behind the scenes, it was really incredible.
I'll add to that yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think back to my first job. I think one of the big things with, whatever your degree is, it is a tool in your toolkit and there's really different paths. I do have chemistry friends that still do chemistry to this day and instrumentation, whether they work for the public or private sector. But one of the things that I remember right out of college, and it really is just taking the basic scientific method. And I know this sounds very simple, but it's so true in regards to when you start a career, especially when you're doing testing in a lab, like I was doing a lot of materials testing, I didn't know any of the ASTM ISO standards that they had talked about. But because I did understand, the scientific method and basic questions of, throwing out a hypothesis and really being able to document, things that you kind of already do day in, day out, whether it be in your labs or in your classes, those basic skills transfer over to your initial career and being detail oriented. So I really think that did help me, right out of college, is really understanding, okay, what are these test methods, how to analyze data, and so we can make conclusions that we can present to management to either say, yes, these products are conforming or not conforming, to standards.
I guess I'll chime in, trying to synthesize all this, but I'd say that from an experience standpoint, it's all really about confidence and risk, right? Do you believe enough in yourself, and are you confident enough in yourself to realize there's lots of things I probably don't know, so I won't be shy about asking, right? You'll find that when you're working, most people are not going to hold that against you. No one expects you to know everything, and people are there to help you, but they'll help you if you ask for it. That's kind of how it works in the working world. Mm-hmm. And so that's why the confidence is so important. On the risk side, risk is not a bad word. Risks are not negative, they're just uncertainties. They can be negative or positive. And the people that are going to be the most successful are the ones that are willing to step outside their comfort zone and take some risk. Ironically, one of the questions I like to ask during interviews is it a good thing if you're 100% successful, right? And everyone kind of, well, there's a trick here somewhere, right? It seems like you should say that's a good thing, but right? But when they say no, I ask them why, right? What's the reason why? Well, the bottom line is if you're always successful, it tells me that you're not taking enough risk, right? The people that actually do the best on the job, the ones that are going to, get promoted, they're going to see a lot of success, they're going to be innovators or disruptors, are the ones that are willing to take chances. You take a crazy chance, but you're willing to try something new or different. And, looking back at my own career in my first job, I was always the guy that would always ask the question, like, why? Like, why are we doing this? Why are we building this? What's the value we're creating? And for some people, it drove them nuts. Like, why? Just do what you're told, right? But it's like, how can I do the best possible job unless I know what the ultimate outcome is supposed to be, right? And so that having that confidence and willing to take that risk definitely paid dividends. And so I definitely would encourage all of you. I know these are two difficult things to do, but I would encourage all of you to find ways to build up your risk appetite and build confidence.
Great wisdom, Neil.
A question that I have in the chat is, how important is your master's degree in your career?
I'll just jump in. For me, it's critical. Just my career path required an MBA. It doesn't mean that all jobs need that. It just depends on where your career is going to take you.
I'll pipe in and say, I chose to be happy with my bachelor's and then apply my focus in some other areas. Growing a 38-year career in the Coast Guard to a very senior officer position took a lot of time and effort that I might have otherwise applied to a master's degree. But I will say that as I offered encouragement and advice to our son and daughter, who now are adults working hard in their professions, it seemed clear to me that a master's degree was going to be important for them to not be limited in their career growth. So our daughter has a master's in education from UC Irvine, and our son, with his bachelor's from UCLA in economics, got an MBA from San Diego University. And those master levels, I think for them, which they got probably 10 years ago or so, are important for their career path progression. And while I don't think it's necessarily a requirement in every profession these days, my sense is that as Neil has excelled with his master's, my sense is important to look around at the folks who are more senior in your organization and maybe ask them, what their opinion is. My guess is most of the time a master's is going to be pretty valuable.
And I will chime in on that question as well. That's a personal dilemma for me, the master's question. So I do not have a master's. I actually was right out of college. I did get my first job, and I was stuck between, do I get my master's? Because I did research, I got published, I should probably go get my master's, or I should work. And what happened was I actually got accepted to the master's program at Cal State Long Beach in chemistry. I did it for one semester. And I actually decided to step away from continuing my master's because one of my mentors, who's Professor Potma, had mentioned to me, hey, that's really just a gold star for you. What are you going to do with your master's? Do you want to get into the university? Do you want to teach? There was a lot of these additional questions in regards to what am I going to do with that? And I knew early on that I enjoyed my professional career. So I instead decided to pursue my private tutoring business. I actually gathered more clients during that time as I worked a full-time job, and I had 3 or 4 clients on the side. So to this day, it probably still has been a 10-year discussion with my husband whether I should still pursue my MBA. And so far, I've looked into many programs from different universities, including UCI. And so far, I've made a decision that I would rather invest that money into maybe a property, maybe pursuing a coffee business that my husband and I have done over the summer instead. So it's tough for me, but it's still definitely something that I've thought about, that I feel that I've needed. But because I have grown internally in my career, so when I was in marketing, every single person in the organization that was my equal counterpart or higher had an MBA, and I was the only one that didn't. So one of the things that I learned was I was kind of getting MBA training as I was a product manager, learning about ROI, learning about P&Ls, things that you would normally do in MBA school. And I actually have gotten feedback from other mentors saying, it seems like you've gotten experience in real life. Why would you want to pay for it? So that's kind of my feel about an MBA program.
Carla, I'd like to offer an underscore. I'm hearing a theme, and frankly, I think it's an important theme. 2 words, well, maybe it's 3, 2 thoughts. Lifelong learning. There's that thread that I think is pervading all of our comments so far. And that, in my view, is a fundamental essential in everyone's professional walk, period. Lifelong learning. And mentors. An important thing to realize, and of course this program is all about mentors for undergrad students. The mentee always chooses their mentor in life. It never goes the other way around. But as you choose your mentor or mentors, it doesn't have to be one, that is a resource of support and information that's invaluable. I can't encourage it enough. Lifelong learning and mentors, I think, are fundamental to everyone's growth and success throughout their entire life.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the next question is, how did you decide to transition from one career workplace to another? And were there any specific reasons you made this transition?
Opportunity is a word that comes up. Opportunity and really where you are in life. So I had an opportunity to work for my competition very early on that put me in management on a fast track scale. So there was an opportunity to run a lab. So I did it and I figured it out, and it was great, with that chemistry degree. And then again, an internal opportunity to, go to the corporate office by working as a product manager. And really in that role, it was, I spent a lot of time reading a lot of different books because I know my background is in chemistry, whether it be mentors. I probably even bounced ideas off Neil like 6 years ago when I first met him, and really just trying to understand we can learn, like John said, we're lifelong learners. You can really learn anything. And so I've always taken that approach. I spent a lot of my time reading business books and asking CEOs what their favorite books are, and using LinkedIn as a resource to kind of gain those skills that, maybe weren't part of my quote undergrad degree. But really that's the word to that question, is just the opportunity has presented itself, and I took the risk to take it because it was scary in some of these career moves. And really more recently, the career move for me, I was in my previous role with Terrazzo and Marble Supply, I covered 3 states. I just had a baby. I was traveling almost every 2 months. It was really difficult as a new mom. So that was part of the recent transition, was I wanted to, be more local. So, really where you are in life also drives that decision, I think.
Well, you always get asked that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? The question never actually goes away. It just changes to, what do you want to do with your life? Right. And there are moments throughout your life where that question will pop up. Some are obvious, like Tiffany's talking about, she had this amazing opportunity, right? That's one moment. Maybe you have a life-changing situation, you get married or you have a baby, or there are obvious things like, I don't like working at this place anymore, the environment is terrible, or right. But there's also the kind of subtle ones that sometimes are not so obvious, that it takes you time to realize, like, am I too comfortable? Or some of these changes that are happening, I may not realize it now, but down the road, that might change my whole, right? If you were a taxi driver back in 2013, you probably worried about like Uber and Lyft. A couple of years later, you definitely were worried about it. And so you're going to find all these moments. And sometimes it might just be like you don't realize it, but maybe you're burned out. Or maybe like you don't want to be the corporate drone anymore and you want to do something more impactful. But you're going to see these moments throughout your life where these will trigger these type of changes in your career. Also, as you get older, right, what you want out of life and what you want to do also changes. Right? When you start working, right, you want to get there, you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to advance. But surprisingly, they found most people, by the time they hit 32, 33 years old, they already start thinking about how they can start giving back and sharing their knowledge, right? They start thinking more about mentorship and passing on their lessons and experiences on. I mean, that's actually not a whole lot. That's like 10 years of work experience, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to confront these moments throughout your life, but to really take advantage of them, you should be seeking those moments rather than reacting to them. It's the best advice I can give you on that.
2 very insightful sets of comments, Tiffany and Neil. I'll add to that, that as I look back on my 40 years of working for a paycheck, and now still working not for a paycheck, that a truism is nothing lasts forever in any industry, in any field, in any position. And I found that forever was on average 3 to 5 years. So what I mean by that is, if the average is 4 years, something tends to happen that's significant, that causes you to rethink. Maybe Tiffany has lots of examples of new opportunities happening in that 3 to 5 year time frame, and so you take advantage of it. Or perhaps you stay with the organization, but the organization changes. You get a new position, or you answer to a new team or a new boss, or you get new responsibilities. So that was, as I looked back, as my career was progressing and came to realize the truth of that 3 to 5 year, things rather cathartically tend to change. It gave me a level of comfort anticipating and embracing that change. The good news is, the stuff that you didn't like so much, it's not going to last forever. The other side of that coin is the stuff that you love, it's probably going to change, and you hope to get to be in the same great place that you were over the last 3 to 5 years.
Okay, so as we reach the midpoint of the panel, I just want to remind students to put any questions that they might have in the chat. So our next question is, how do you manage competition in the workplace, and how do you do what you do best?
Competition meaning conflict or competing with other people?
I believe it means like competition as in to get a position in the workplace.
Yes, as in standing up among your other, coworkers and other employees.
Well, I'll offer
I'm going to
a thought.
use my.
No, go ahead, Tiffany. You framed your thought. Do it.
Sorry, Todd. No worries. Yeah, I'm going to use my mentor on this, which is Professor Potma. One of the things he taught me, and I think I sat through one of his separate classes, and it was like this 30-minute talk about how to be well-rounded, be balanced, right? So, we have our degrees. That's one aspect in our toolbox. And then the other aspect is, you as a person, as an individual, your personality, what drives you, what gets you excited, I'm a huge foodie. So anyone who follows me on my Instagram will think that I'm a food blogger for fun and I have a baby. But, it's those things that differentiate you. And everyone is going to be different. So there's really not one answer to that. And then I also, every time I've interviewed for a position, I tell my husband this, he disagrees with me because he's in a different type of field. He's in the computer engineering world where specific skill sets are very critical in that role. Whereas in at least the roles that I've applied for, the way that I treat it is every interview is like a final for me. So I study who I'm going to go see. I try to, look up the company website, find them on LinkedIn. I mean, the internet just has so many resources that I really do my homework. So I'm also a, previous chess player. So I try to think 2 to 3 steps ahead of what do I think they're going to ask me? Do I want to do a mock-up with, my husband, a friend, and I still have mentees to this day, that still call me and ask me if I'm willing to review stuff with them. But I think really that sense of, well-roundedness of who you are that drives your passion outside of, your 9 to 5 or your workday, definitely helps you be competitive. So they see who you are as a person and see those strengths.
Good stuff. I would offer a couple thoughts. Skill set, of course. You're hired with a perception that you've got an ability to do something that benefits the organization. So of course, skill sets are important, but they by far are not the last or the only important thing. I would add to that interpersonal relationship skills. So the ability to get along with others. It's the rare organization where you will be by yourself forever and interacting with others is never important. That probably would be a very unusual case. In general, the extent to which we can interact with others favorably, be a contributing member of the team, and as our career or opportunities allow, lead that team, lead that group of folks. So skills, skill set, technical, interpersonal relationship skills. And third, I would carve out communication skills. The ability to clearly and persuasively make your point or offer insight, both verbally and in writing, and to do that in a professional way. I would say that those things are huge in not only landing your job, but importantly, growing your career as you enter that profession.
So I'll just add to that because it's really great advice from Tiffany and John. All that's important. We tend to discount, especially interpersonal stuff that John's talking about. How good you do your tasks and all that stuff. That's important. The most important thing. Can you work with other people? Can you communicate? At the end of the day, what most organizations care about is the value you create for them, right? Anyone can sit there and hack away and write a bunch of code or calculate complex mathematical formulas or put stuff together as a pharmacist or a chemist. What they want to know is what else are you bringing to the table, right? The differentiators that Tiffany is talking about. But that's what they want. And they're looking for you. Are you the person that can step outside the comfort zone and find those opportunities for the organization. They may not always be successful, but are you actually willing to do that? Are you a person that actually creates value for them? And if you can do that while you work well with other people, that's going to be some negative stakeholders and positive ones. That's how you actually build your reputation. Because if you do that, then people will be asking for you rather than you go seeking for those opportunities. I can tell you that's how I wound up working with Warren Buffett. He asked for me, right? I know I've heard so much about this guy, Neil, right? He's done all these, amazing things, and he's not a glory hound. We have some big things we're trying to do. Let's get this guy, right? In my IBM days, he literally called up the CEO, Jeannie Rometty, and said, "I want Neil. Bring him." That's where you want to get to.
Our next question is, do you have any regrets about your career? And if you had the chance to go back and do something differently, what would you do? And any advice you would give to your younger self?
I have no regrets whatsoever. I'm quick to say that, for instance, with regard to my Coast Guard career, every minute, literally, of that 38 years was perfect. There were certainly challenges and hard work along the way and demands, but boy, it was satisfying. It was fulfilling. It seemed meaningful, and in retrospect, it seemed to really accomplish meaningful things, both in that military sector as well as the private sector and the public sector. I think that that some keys to realize are getting to a point of completion of a career path. For me, was something way beyond my ability to fully conceive or plan out in any methodical way. I would say that objectively, I ended up incredibly successfully, but it's not because I'm that good. It's because I did something that every one of you can do and can do as a matter of certainty. And I promise you at the end, you will be more successful than I. And that is to take small steps, little steps along the way that each make sense. Each are directed in a way that seems to be the right path for you. Sometimes you'll kind of go sideways and you'll do some correcting. But if you tend to be a little thoughtful, if you tend to be a little bit intentional about making good choices, and when you need help with those good choices, asking some friends, but better asking your mentors. The series of those little tiny steps, I promise you at the end of a block of your career, and certainly at the end of your career path, you will look back and say, it's astonishing. John was right. I reached a pinnacle I couldn't possibly have imagined, and there I was. And one objective example of that, I entered the United States Coast Guard after I graduated from UC Irvine with a draft number of 7. I was in the very last draft. I was going to go in a branch of the military. My dad had been in the Navy. I had no intention of joining the military. I was ready to go to work. Nonetheless, I got drafted. And I was a junior enlisted guy. And after my 6-year commitment that I took responsibly and said, oh, I'm supposed to do it, so let me do this well, I was a 2nd-class petty officer. And I decided that maybe I wanted to pursue a little bit more opportunity, a little bit more responsibility. Well, fast forward another 30 years, I ended a 38-year career as number 5 in the United States Coast Guard Reserve on the planet and did some extraordinary things. And how could a little guy who had just graduated from UC Irvine and became an enlisted member of the Coast Guard end up at that sort of pinnacle level? It really wasn't foreseeable for me, but each individual step was foreseeable, and it ended up getting me to a place that I'm so blessed to have accomplished.
Well, I can't make the same claim as John about no regrets. Hindsight's 2020. But one big regret actually was I threw away a lot of business cards as a college student, right? All these like events that you guys get to go, the networking, but I actually also had a job working for, at the time it was Extension, now it's continuing education. And so I would see these guys that were they weren't just like working professionals teaching these, continuing education classes. These guys were like directors and vice presidents at companies, like big companies. And because I would see them like, every week, and I would chit chat with them, right? They would actually ask me like, hey, what are you going to do when you graduate, right? What are you going to do when you grow up? And, I quite haven't figured that out, but they would all give me their business card. They say, if you're ever looking for a job, call me or email me. I would love to help you out, right? I never thought twice about it. Just threw them off in some corner and they collected dust and probably got eventually thrown away. I missed out on so many amazing opportunities and missed out on really building an amazing network so young in my life that I look back, I really regret that because I didn't really understand the value of networking. You don't go and network because you need something. That's the worst time to network. You go to make social connections, right? Because it's not so much who you know, it's who you know, who they know that can actually open doors for you. And I can tell you that every job I've ever had came through someone that I knew, right? Even the UN stuff, speaking in front of the General Assembly the first time was all set up because of somebody I knew. I never even asked for it. They came to me because of those relationships. And that's one big regret that I know that I remember when I was your guys' age, you don't realize the power this really has. And so I never really took full advantage of that. And so I would definitely encourage you guys, don't make the same mistake I did. I don't know how many of you guys are seniors, maybe put a thumbs up if you're a senior. Definitely take advantage of that while you can, because college right now gives you these unique opportunities to make these connections. Once you're out in the real world, you're not going to have the same level of opportunities. So definitely take advantage of it.
Neil, can I ask you a timing question about when you set those business cards aside? Were you younger than your mid 20s, 25, 26, 27? Were you younger than that?
Oh yeah, but I was getting those cards when I was like 19 years old.
Well, here's why I ask. I've also spent a lot of my volunteer time leading an organization committed to mental health, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the Orange County affiliate. I was blessed to be president of that organization for a time. And among the things I've learned that I give to each of you, sort of an awareness of the biology of your brain. The human brain, oddly, peculiarly, as capable as you all are, does not fully form until you're mid to, in some cases, late 20s, but around 25, 26. What does that mean? It's that frontal lobe that gives us that ability to fully understand consequences that develops last in the way the human brain develops. So perhaps, as bright and capable as Neil is, perhaps that frontal lobe hadn't fully developed at age 18 or 19. He would have been precocious if it had. And that gave him then the willingness to abandon what later in life he sees as something valuable that he would never advise someone to dispense with. So to the extent that any of you, or perhaps many of you, are not yet in your mid-20s, realize to give yourself some patience and maybe take a second or third check on something, maybe even talk to your mentor who's more than 25 years old to see whether or not you want to just at least pause on that choice that Neil made to give yourself an advantage later.
Those, John and Neil, those are great tips. I mean, the only thing I could think of summarizing, I also think I don't have any regrets, or I like to think that I don't have any moving forward, because I don't want to be able to linger on that. I think that's where, sometimes some anxiety could be coming up. But the one thing that I will say is, I wish don't take yourself too seriously out of college. In college, I think there were things that I felt, it needs to be in this box, and it is. You're a student. It's natural for you to think linearly. You take the class, you need to pass it, you get to this next step so that you can get your undergrad degree and decide what you want to do. But I think that's the one big thing is, don't take yourself too seriously. You are young, you're learning, you're going to make mistakes, and it's okay. And some days, you might have to just take it a day at a time. And if it's that bad, whether, you might not be having that day. Everything is temporary. That's the one thing, that yoga has taught me is, just breathe it through. And, again, it just take it one day at a time. And if it can't be one day, it could be 1 hour, but don't take yourself too seriously. I used to think in my early 20s, even late teens, things were the end of the world. And now that I think back, I just took things too seriously.
Our next question is, how would you initiate a mentor-mentee relationship, since it can sometimes be intimidating?
Join the Physical Sciences Undergrad Mentor Program first, because there are a ton of fantastic mentors in that space already.
I would ask, right? This goes back to what I was talking about earlier about confidence. You have to ask. And when you ask, you have to ask in a nice way, right? Don't make this just about yourself. That's what we tend to do. Kind of frame it up. I can tell you that LinkedIn, if you're not on there, you should get on there. It's your best friend. Go out there and see people that have already had a similar career path that you might be thinking about. 2 out of 3 people, if you were to reach out to them and just say, hey, what you've done is what I'm thinking about. I would love just to understand how your career unfolded and how you got to where you were. 2 out of 3 people will say, I'm happy to talk to you, right? People love to talk about themselves, at least most people do. And so really make it more about them. And again, this is your opportunity to try and make that kind of network connection. Look for the social things. Don't make it about like what you want, what you need. If you guys wind up bonding, you'll find that that person will start coming back to you and saying like, hey, what can I do to help you? That's the right way to try and approach this, right? You got great programs like this one where they help do the matchmaking and stuff and people, but don't be afraid to reach out to other people, especially if you think they might have some good advice for you.
I would say that one of the greatest compliments I've received in the span of my days is to be asked to be a mentor. Certainly as part of this program, but on more than one occasion, on a number of occasions outside this program. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I realized that the mentee, you always pick the mentor. It never goes the other way around. And so not only is it a high compliment, but hopefully you've sort of watched that potential mentor for a little while to get a sense that maybe there's a connection there. Maybe we can communicate, and maybe that person has something to offer to me in guiding me through my professional and frankly, even my life path. So it's a high compliment that you can give, and no harm, no foul for that potential mentor to say, I'd really like to help, but I'm busy, I'm overcommitted, I'm sorry, I can't help. But often, if they're the kind of quality people that you're going to choose, they might say, but have you thought about Fred or Mary or Jill? And then you can decide whether that's a good fit or not.
I think that's all the questions that I have in the chat, unless there's anybody, any other students that want to either unmute themselves or type in a last minute question.
So Carla, one of the thoughts that we all had an opportunity to think about that we haven't covered yet is how do we deal with stressful parts of our job? Well, first of all, that implies or asserts that there will be stress in our position. And I would say that if you're alive and you're a human interacting with others or not on a daily basis, there's probably going to be some stress. So for my own case, some of the things that are very important for me are exercise. That has lots of benefits in addition to stress management. Friends, interacting with friends, having that social connection is valuable. And fundamental for me is my faith walk. That is key in, frankly, all of my stress experiences. So I would offer those three: exercise, friends, and faith walk, as tools in your bag for dealing with the stress that's inevitable as part of life.
Thank you. Well, I have a question that came in for Neil. If you could share more on how your position as a UN advisor.
Yeah, great.
Sure. I don't know if it's that glamorous. It's like herding cats sometimes. Um, but my work revolves around two like key areas. So one, if you're not familiar with it, the UN has 17 goals for a better world. They call them the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's like end poverty, zero hunger, better healthcare, improve diversity and inclusion. I won't bore you with all 17. You can definitely look them up. And these are real goals the UN wants to make happen by 2030. They're big goals, but how do we actually get there is how we're trying to figure out to do that. And so a lot of my work is trying to figure out projects that we can actually do that would actually, solve part, if not all, of these goals. And that means, if you're familiar with the UN, it's not like this one grandiose entity. It's 47 different governmental agencies, and they each have their own domains and stuff. And as a result, they're very siloed, which is the other part of my work, is actually helping them build out an ecosystem and partnerships. They're not used to collaborating with the other agencies, let alone external parties. And if you really want to, figure out and resolve climate change, you're not going to be able to do that on your own as one agency. And so a lot of my work also then is building out this ecosystem and kind of building them, breaking them out of their siloed mentality and finding the right partners to actually work with out there. So you can tell it's quite the uphill battle, but it's a worthwhile endeavor because this helps everybody. Not to be cliche, but a rising tide lifts all boats. That's what a lot of my work is. And you'll find in your careers that it doesn't matter how good you become, if you can't make the people around you better, lift all the boats, you won't get very far in your career or in life.
Okay. I think that concludes our panel for today. I really want to thank the students and especially the panelists for coming out and taking their time to give some really insightful information. I hope you all found it as valuable as I did. So we'll have the video recording for the Zoom on the PSUM website that was dropped in the chat. So thank you, everybody.
Great. What a pleasure.